Did you know that it is actually illegal to pay children for their hard work? Now, I know, I'm just as disgusted as you are hearing this news. If I was a 6-year-old working a 9 to 12, I'd want to be compensated fairly for my work. However, I don't make the rules, guys, and as many of you know, the children yearn for the mines. So who would I be to deny them of their true passion? Today, I'll be becoming a bit of an adventure capitalist by investing in my biggest challenge yet, parenthood. Starting off with just 5 bugmen and their hive queen stranded in the middle of the desert with no food, no armor, and no weapons, can I build an army to protect over 50 bug children from my cannibalistic baby-eating neighbors? Or will they eat all the poor souls before they ever get to live out their dreams in the mines? Before we can build an industrial-sized daycare, we're gonna have to address the elephant in the room. We are currently stranded in the middle of the desert with no food, no weapons, and there are tons of flesh-eating animals around who are ready to eat us alive. So, while I send 2 of my hivers out to start growing some rice, I have my other 2 colonists chop down cacti and turn the wood into bows. Now, you might be wondering, why don't I have my queen do some of the work as well? It's because aside from popping out babies like an assembly line, the queen is pretty much useless. Speaking of babies, as long as the queen is well fed, we'll have around 2 days before she lays her first egg. Once that egg is laid, it'll hatch into an infant and then slowly grow into a free laborer, otherwise known as a child. Over time, she'll lay eggs faster and faster until we have more underpaid workers than an Amazon warehouse. However, currently we haven't produced a single egg because my colony has had the worst stroke of bad luck I've ever seen. First, a rabid bone dog decides to attack one of my future caretakers and leaves him wounded. Then, another ankle biter comes out the wazoo and starts ripping that same colonist to shreds. And when we finally get the chance to heal up the wounds of our injured soldiers, a skin spider decides to lunge at our hiver's beak yet again. The spider bit his right leg and left him with an infection in the middle of the desert with no medicine. And if we weren't already suffering enough, the queen decides to go on a hunger strike where she refuses to eat and forces herself into starvation. I gotta say, this playthrough is off to a great start. After fending off several more animal attacks, it seemed like we had indirectly solved our hunger problem by defending ourselves against all of the aggressive fauna. We were able to prepare several meals that would have normally given us food poisoning if our bug people didn't have stomachs of steel. When the food began piling in, our queen finally stopped complaining about her little tummy ache and started to eat again. So, after filling up the bellies of our colonists with a mix between dog meat and spider ass, it was time for us to build our first home. Many of my Rimworld viewers usually compare my base building skills to the work of the late Leonardo da Vinci. However, this new base might be one of my best works yet. The home featured a very spacious and open design. It had an office for some late night carpentry, multicolored walls to really make the rooms pop, and finally a floor design combining both urban and rural living areas by using a mix between dirt and concrete floors. This home was truly a masterpiece. We even had visitors come by who wanted to marvel at our work of art, and we showed them hospitality by exchanging our arrows with their knees. Now that I had a stable food supply, a beautiful home, and a drug addiction, it was clear to me that this was the perfect time for me to start having children. After the queen finishes one of her meals, she thinks she's about to take the biggest shit of her life. But instead of engaging in fecal incompetence, a beautiful new life is born into our colony. Our queen has laid her first egg, and within 3 days, it will hatch into a beautiful newborn baby. If we raise it right, its first words might be stockholder value and unpaid overtime. Now that our first child is on the way, it's time to get serious about our colony. So after crafting several more bows and clubs, we went on the offensive to wipe out several of the killer spiders and dogs. That way, our children aren't turned into dog food the second they're born. After clearing up the area, we began building out several rooms. We moved the carpentry room out of the bedroom, We began building a storage room to contain our valuables and children, and we finally created a room that did not resemble a crack house for our queen and 2 princes to sleep in. And it looks like our expansion efforts were placed just in time, because as Beep ended up pooping out some more eggs, the first child in our colony was hatched. I don't know if the queen was still high when she named him, but for some reason she decided to name her firstborn child Tongue. As Tongue was born, I was faced with my first problem. Despite telling the child that if he doesn't work, I'll make his wages negative, he wouldn't do shit. He kinda just sat there looking at me stupid and wouldn't stop crying. On top of that, no one warns you how much food these little parasites consume. Apparently, he was too good to eat dog meat and spider ass. So within the first day of having my child, he was already starving. Thankfully, our rice finally began to grow. So I was able to make some baby food to feed the child. But just as I was able to feed Tongue, a new child had already been hatched. This one's name was Takamitsu. Unlike his brother, Tongue, feeding him did not silence the child. He wouldn't stop crying and was keeping up my colonist at night with all of his screaming. So I did what any good parent would do and threw his ass outside so I could get some sleep. It was clear to me that if I was having this many problems with just 2 children, I don't know how in the hell I'd survive with 30. At this rate, a new gremlin is being born every 2 to 3 days, and we need to make accommodations for all the little minions. So I expanded out my base as much as possible. We built a kitchen for the mass production of meals and baby food. We began researching electricity and defenses for our colony, and we even began construction of a central living room where our colony could eat, play games, and socialize. By the time we had finished our renovations, Tongue and Takamitsu were now 3 years old in Hiver years, which for context is about 4 days in normal time. Although this did not seem like a long time, this was the age where the children could finally contribute to society. They are able to learn key colony values like unpaid overtime and rationing. On top of that, the kids can now feed themselves, clean, and even haul large objects. However, the most important skill that the children get at this age is the ability to take care of other children. This means that if I'm able to invest in enough minions, I will have an infinite cycle of little laborers being born to take care of their younger siblings. For a moment, everything was going pretty damn great. We had a steady flow of expendables being produced. We expanded our base out a ton, and the mini-me's were doing a pretty good job raising one another. However, one night our firstborn Tongue decided it was a great idea to pet a wild ostrich. In return, it tore the little shit's leg off and left him bleeding out in the middle of the desert. Although we were able to kill the ostrich, Tongue's wounds were too severe, and he ended up dying while we were trying to tend to his wounds. To grieve Tongue's death, our colony thought it was a great idea to get high as fuck and party the pain away. We commenced the ultimate dream blunt rotation and mourned our firstborn's death. However, during the party, a furry decided to raid our village while we were all getting zooted out of our minds, and he ended up stabbing our second-born Takamitsu to death. For his funeral, we decided to make a strict rule against using drugs. After losing 2 very important laborers, it was clear to me we had a big problem. We couldn't protect every child that was born. There's just gonna be too many of them. In order to maximize production and build a great society, there's gonna be some necessary sacrifices that need to happen along the way. So today, we'll be training the children using the RUST program, otherwise known as Rimworld Urban Survival Training. The RUST program focuses on maximizing production of the colony while also raising your chances of survival. For instance, imagine you are a 7-year-old steelworker in the mines. You and your 8-year-old buddy Steve have to get around 50 pounds of steel to the queen by sundown. However, a giant man-eating bug decides to beeline it straight towards Steve, and you're faced with a very difficult decision. Do you A, drop all of your steel and run back to the colony, ignoring the demands given by the queen? Do you B, attempt to fight off the giant bug with Steve, possibly risking your life in his? Or do you C, shoot Steve in the leg with your bow and arrow, allowing you to escape the giant bug and grab all the steel, making the queen extremely happy at the cost of your brethren's death? If you chose anything but option C, you are not worthy of being an unpaid laborer in my colony. Because we produce so many children, you can kind of look at them as expendables. Steve would have wanted to die because he knew his death would have led to the queen's happiness. After spending nearly 3 months teaching my children the Rust program, our colony was absolutely thriving. By day 54, we have built a living, breathing society filled with over 22 colonists. The colony now consists of a total of 12 adults, 8 angsty teenagers, 6 snotty children, and 4 newborns. We did have more, but let's just say they didn't have what it took to be where we are today. Let me walk you through the life cycle of our hive colony. First, Beep sits on her legendary throne. After 2 hours of constipation, she either shits herself or lays a new egg. The eggs are then kept warm by the bottoms of one of our children, and we have him sit on it for multiple days. After the 2nd or 3rd day, the egg then hatches into a beautiful newborn laborer. Once it does, the newborn is handed off to our children who specialize in child labor. Their main jobs are to feed and take care of the infant until it reaches the age of 3. Once the child hits the age of 3, it's time for them to get their lazy asses up and get a job. During the day, children are responsible for cleaning, hauling objects, and taking care of their younger siblings. Once the younger kids are put to sleep, they are then responsible for taking up classes at night school. Here, they learn important skills taught by our teenagers like how to use a pickaxe, and how to ration your food. Once the child hits the age of 7, they're now ready for manual labor. The strongest children go to the mines, while the weaker children tend to stick to tasks like farming, teaching, and cleaning. The children usually live to the age of 15 or 16 before they have a mine shaft collapse on them or are eaten by a giant beak thing. But for those who make it to adulthood, they are added as soldiers to my army meant to protect against raiders and animal attacks. Speaking of raiders, we've run into a little bit of a problem lately. Recently, our neighbors to the east have become extremely aggressive, and they've been sending large, powerful raids to my base where they try to kill, steal, and eat all of our children. Normally, I wouldn't mind losing a child or two for the greater good of productivity. However, the mass spread of panic and fear in my colony is causing a massive halt in the productivity of our civilization. Our queen realized that if we're going to build a peaceful, productive society, we're going to need to go to war. During times of war, the United States was known for converting several car manufacturer assembly lines into places where they could mass produce weapons for their military. If we could do this exact same thing for our military, we could absolutely crush the neighboring Hive village. Currently, we have about 30 colonists. However, only around 13 of them are adults, leaving us 17 untrained expendables who would normally be useless in battle. However, if we were to begin training our young ones to become war veterans by the age of 12, we would have a significant advantage over our enemies in battle. So, that's exactly what we did. Instead of using steel to produce beautiful buildings and art, we instead produced machine pistols and fragment axes. Instead of using our textiles to make beautiful fluffy carpets, we made Reaver armor and paladin helmets. And finally, instead of teaching the children to follow their dreams of working in the mines, we played several John Wick movies in class to teach them how to effectively kill their enemies. These children were no longer just cute-looking bug people. They were now natural-born killers. Imagine you're walking through a forest invading a nearby enemy base. You hear a child crying in the distance and instinctively you go to help him. As you approach him through the brush, he begins maniacally laughing, and instead of finding a helpless child, you instead find yourself full of 1,000 bullets from his government-issued minigun. These children went from yearning for the mines to craving the blood of their enemies. And if that wasn't enough, a group of vampires decided to visit my colony. In return for allowing them to host a not-so-suspicious family gathering at my base, they allowed me to convert 2 of my children into blood-sucking vampires. Now Dweeb and Smarty were immortal and twice as strong. Now that I have an army full of blood-sucking, warmongering child soldiers, it was time for us to take this war to the Hiver territory. After destroying the baby-eating Hivers, we burned down what we could and kidnapped their hive queen. Why do we need another queen, you might ask? So we can produce twice the amount of children, resulting in double productivity. While I teach my more civil Hivers to farm, mine, and produce, the Savage Hive Queen will teach her hive to kill, raid other villages, and steal resources, creating the perfect yin and yang hive and fully maximizing productivity. With that being said, we have successfully raised over 30 bug children, destroyed our neighbors, and made sure that no child will ever be a lazy bum again. I don't know about you, but I consider this challenge a staggering success. If you enjoyed the video and are looking for more, make sure to check out my Rimworld challenge where I have to survive stranded on an asteroid with no spacesuit or oxygen. With that being said, I love you guys and I'll see you in the next one.